Welcome back to the SIE podcast. Today we are going to share a quiz with you that corresponds with an audio lesson from the full series of audio lessons for the Securities Industries Essentials podcast, audio lessons for the SIE exam. The full series of audio lessons that correspond to these quizzes is available at siepodcast.com. This quiz consists of questions which are answered in Lesson 2 of the Securities Industries Essentials podcast, audio lessons for the SIE exam. This is a quiz on common stock. The first question: in which of the following sections of the balance sheet is the common stock placed? And the choices are A, asset, B, equity, C, liability, and D, revenue. Again, which one? Asset or equity or liability or revenue sections of the balance sheet? The answer is the equity section. The revenue is not even part of the balance sheet. That's part of the income statement. But a balance sheet consists of assets, liabilities, and owner's equity. So equity is included in the balance sheet. Question 2. A common stockholder owns a portion of the company. A, true, B, false. And the answer is true. You are an equity owner of the company, not a debt owner, but an equity owner. Common stock is equity and not debt. Question 3. Which of the following can issue common stocks? A, corporations, B, investment companies, C, both corporations and investment companies, and D, neither corporation nor investment companies. And the answer is C, both corporations and investment companies can issue common stock. Question number 4. A no-par stock means, and the choices are A, the stock does not have voting rights, B, the stock does not receive dividends, C, the stock has negligible or very low par value, or D, the stock has no intrinsic value. And I'll give you those choices again. A no-par stock means A, the stock does not have voting rights, B, the stock does not receive dividends, C, the stock has negligible or very low par value, or D, the stock has no intrinsic value. And the answer is D, the stock has no intrinsic value. The value of the corporation is derived by the book value of the company, which is the excess of equity over liabilities, or in the case of a publicly traded company, the market value of the stock. But it does not have any intrinsic value. It is set by the market or by the balance sheet in the case of a private corporation. Question number: why do stocks have low par value? And the choices are A, low par value allows more people to buy stocks and therefore increasing the company's equity. B, lowering the par value also lowers the tax of the corporation. C, the low par value assures that the corporation issues only a sustainable amount of stock. Or D, the New York Stock Exchange rules does not allow a high par value. And again, I'll give you the questions and answers again over. Question number 5, why do stocks have low par value? A low par value allows more people to buy stocks and therefore increasing the company's equity. B, lowering the par value also lowers the tax of the corporation. C, the low par value ensures that the corporation issues only a sustainable amount of stock. Or D, the New York Stock Exchange rules do not allow high par value stock. And the answer is B. Lowering the par value also lowers the tax of the corporation. Now, this is usually a tax incurred when organizing the corporation, where a state may tax the corporation based on the par value of its stock. It has nothing to do with income taxes. This is an organizational tax that would be incurred at the state level when a company organizes and issues stock in a particular state. Question 6. These are shares that have been sold and then bought back by the company. A. Authorized shares. B. Issued shares. C. Outstanding shares. And D. Treasury shares. And the answer is treasury shares. When a company issues its stock and then buys back the stock, those stocks are shown on the balance sheet as treasury stock or treasury shares. Question number 7. Which of the following is not included when computing for a company's earnings per share? A. Authorized shares. B. Issued shares. C. Outstanding shares. Or D. Treasury shares. And the answer is treasury shares. And possibly authorized shares, because just because a company authorizes shares does not mean that the authorized but unissued shares are included in earnings per share. So the answer for this one would be both A, the authorized shares, or I should say the issued shares less the authorized shares, because issued shares are also authorized shares, but not necessarily issued. So any authorized shares that have not been issued would not be included in the calculation of earnings per share, as well as treasury shares. But if a company's stock is authorized and issued, those would be the outstanding shares, and the outstanding shares are what is used to calculate the earnings per share of a company. Question number 8. The blank, fill in the blank, handles the transfer of stock from an old stockholder to a new one. And the choices are A, a bookkeeper, B, the registrar, C, the rights agent, or D, the transfer agent. And the answer is the transfer agent. D, the transfer agent. The question again was, blank handles the transfer of stock from an old stockholder to a new one, and that's the transfer agent. Question number 9. Which of the following is true about the rights of a stockholder? And select all that apply. A. A stockholder has the right to vote at the company's annual meeting. B. The amount of votes that a stockholder has is determined by the number of shares he owns. C. The stockholder has the right to buy shares of stock before they are offered to somebody else at issue price. Or D, the stockholder's liability is limited to the value of his stock. And the answer for that is A, B, C, and D, but there's a caveat here. C, the answer is C, the stockholder has the right to buy shares of stock before they are offered to somebody else at the issue price. Only takes place if the company has allowed preemptive rights in its charter, in its articles of incorporation. If a company has not put in preemptive rights, then C is not correct. So that is determined by whether the company has issued preemptive rights or not. So the correct answer would probably be A, B, maybe C if preemptive rights are there, and D. So A, the stockholder has a right to vote at the company's annual meeting. B, the amount of votes that the stockholder has is determined by the number of shares he owns. And D, the stockholder's liability is limited to the value of his stock. Or your liability is determined by what you buy the stock at and what it can go down to. So it can go down to 0 but a corporation cannot hit you for additional capital to keep the company running. Your loss is limited by your investment. Okay, question number 10. According to the New York Stock Exchange, which of the following does not require a stockholder vote? A, the clearance of a stock split. B, the declaration of a reverse stock split. C, the issuance of convertible bonds. Or D, the purchase of treasury stock. Well, the answer is the purchase of treasury stock, D, and also the declaration of a reverse split or a forward split. That is done by the board of directors. But the issuance of a convertible bond would require a stockholder vote. And the reason being is the issuance of a convertible bond has the possible risk of diminishing the equity of the existing stockholders by the issuance of the new stock that might be converted by use of a convertible bond. Question 11. Under the New York Stock Exchange rules, a stock dividend can be made by the decision of the board of directors as the dividend is less than A, 10%, B, 15%, C, 20%, or D, 25%. And the answer is D, 25%. So the board of directors can issue a stock dividend as long as it's less than 25% without the approval of the stockholders. Question number 12. Only those stockholders present at the annual meeting can vote. True or false? That's false. You can vote by proxy. And if you are a stockholder of a publicly traded corporation, you will get a proxy statement in the mail with a ballot form that you can send in to vote your shares at the annual meeting, and they will be counted. Question 13. A stockholder can change his vote on his proxy statement if he attends the annual meeting. True or false? The answer is true. You can vote by proxy and then change your mind and vote your conscience at the annual meeting and change your vote that was on your proxy. Question number 14. Which of the following does not allow different classes of common stock? A, the American Stock Exchange, B, the NASDAQ, C, the New York Stock Exchange, or D, all stock exchanges allow 4 different classes of common stock. And the answer is the New York Stock Exchange only allows one class of common stock. However, they do allow multiple issuances of preferred stock. Question number 15. According to the Securities Act of blank, a common stockholder has the right to inspect the record book of stockholders. And the choices are A, 1933, B, 1934, C, 1943, or D, 1944. And the answer is 1934. According to the Securities Act of 1934, a common stockholder has the right to inspect the record book of stockholders. Question number 16. Which of the following are negotiable securities according to the New York Stock Exchange rules? A, a certificate of deposit, B, mutual funds, C, savings bonds, or D, transfer of ownerships. And the answer is D, transfer of ownerships. Question 17. A stockholder is not allowed to sell his rights to buy a stock. A, true, B, false. And the answer is B, false. A stockholder can sell his rights to buy stock. These are usually called preemptive rights, and the company may issue these rights when they issue new shares of stock. Question number 18. In the event of a corporate dissolution or bankruptcy, a common stockholder has a right to the corporate assets. Well, the answer is true, but that's only after everybody else has been paid off. A common stockholder stands at the bottom of priorities in a bankruptcy, at the very bottom of the list. A common stockholder gets whatever is left over after all the secured and non-secured creditors have been paid off. Question 19. A normal settlement states that you need to own the stock to be an owner of record at least blank business days before the record date in order to be a stockholder of record. And the A1, B2, C3, or D4. And the answer is 2. And that corresponds with the transfer of ownership. The settlement of the purchase of a stock is done over a 2-day period of time. So the answer to that is you need to be a owner of record at least 2 business days before the record date in order to be a stockholder of record, because that has to do with the settlement of the shares, 2-day settlement. And the final question in this quiz is, this is the right of a shareholder to maintain his proportionate ownership in a corporation. The choices are A, cum rights, B, ex rights, C, preemptive rights, or D, rights offerings. And the answer is preemptive rights. Rights offerings come as a result of preemptive rights. So the preemptive right is your right to maintain a proportional ownership in the company if it issues additional shares of stock. Thank you for listening. I hope you did well. If you need to review this topic, please re-listen to this lesson from the full series of audio lessons, which are available at siepodcast.com. Best of luck in your studies. All quizzes and content of the SIE podcast are copyrighted by Franz Amundsen, and all rights are reserved. No duplication is allowed without express written permission by Franz Amundsen.